Good morning viewers. In today's class we are going to discuss about new criticism. आज के क्लास में हम न्यू क्रिटिसिज्म के बारे में बताएंगे और जो इम्पोर्टेंट फैक्टर्स इसमें है लाइक ऑटोटेलिक टेक्स्ट, पैराडॉक्स, हेरेसी ऑफ पैराफ्रेज, इंटेंशनल फैलेसी एंड अफेक्टिव फैलेसी, इन सब के बारे में हम डिस्कस करेंगे. ओके, वी विल गिव a detailed discussion on autotelic text, paradox, heresy of paraphrase, intentional fallacy and affective fallacy. Okay, actually new criticism was started in America in 1929. So new criticism में ये कहता है कि किसी को भी टेक्स्ट के जो एक्सटर्नल फैक्टर्स है उसके बारे में सोचने का ज़रूरत तो है ही नहीं है. One should consider only the internal aspects of the text, not the external factors. So we have to consider only about the internal factors like rhythm, pattern, genre, etc., and we should not consider about the author according to new criticism. What we need is a close reading of the text without considering the social, biographical and political background of the author. Or we have to look only about the internal factors of the text. We have to read it closely, but we should not consider the social, biographical and political background of the author. Author के background के बारे में हमें सोचना तो है ही नहीं है. सिर्फ और सिर्फ हमें पढ़ना है, टेक्स्ट को पढ़ना है और उसके अंदर जो फैक्टर्स है उसी के बारे में हमें उसी को ही हमें कंसिडर करना है. एंड अकॉर्डिंग टू न्यू क्रिटिसिज्म, author's personality should not be mentioned or author's personality should not be there in the textbook. टेक्स्ट में जो लिखा है उसके अंदर ऑथर के पर्सनालिटी को आना ही नहीं चाहिए. शैडो ऑफ ऑथर्स पर्सनालिटी शुड नॉट बी देयर इन द टेक्स्ट बुक. दिस इज व्हाट T.S. Eliot mentions in tradition and individual talent, that an author should have impersonal or objective views in his textbook. He should not be affected by any factors like any factors of his personality. In new criticism, analysis of the text is made through evaluating the formal aspects of the text like meter, rhythm, rhyme scheme and theme. Importance is given to figure of speech. सिर्फ और सिर्फ फिगर ऑफ स्पीच को ही इम्पोर्टेंस देता है, किसी और चीज को इम्पोर्टेंस नहीं देते. एंड नेक्स्ट इज द मोस्ट इम्पोर्टेंट थिंग रिगार्डिंग न्यू क्रिटिसिज्म, दैट इज ऑटोटेलिक टेक्स्ट. This is an important factor of new criticism, that every text is self-contained and it contains meaning itself. That means meaning is within the text, not outside the text. Text is completely free from the historical, cultural and authorial background. We don't need to go anywhere outside the text, but meaning is inside the text, and this independence is called autotelic. हमें टेक्स्ट के मीनिंग को ढूंढकर बाहर जाने की ज़रूरत है ही नहीं है. मीनिंग सब कुछ टेक्स्ट के अंदर ही है. सो टेक्स्ट इज अ ऑटोनोमस एंटिटी. टेक्स्ट इज एन ऑटोनोमस एंटिटी. इसका मतलब है अपने आप में टेक्स्ट कंप्लीट है, तो मीनिंग को बाहर ढूंढने की ज़रूरत तो है ही नहीं है. It has its own identity. A text is a complete one. So another important feature of this new criticism is paradox. Actually, Cleaneth Brook is an important new critic, and he wrote this problem of paradox in his book Language of Paradox. Paradox for Cleaneth Brook, paradox beautifies a poem and it's inevitable for poetry. So क्लीनेथ ब्रूक पैराडॉक्स के बारे में बताते हैं कि पैराडॉक्स एक पोएम को ब्यूटिफाई करता है एंड इट्स इनएविटेबल. Actually, paradox happens when we connect two opposite ideas. Then only we get paradox. When two opposite ideas are mentioned, we can call this paradox. Here statements are contradictory. Yes, of course. While we are using paradox, we are mixing two opposite ideas. But according to Cleaneth Brook, this solely gives beauty to a poem, and this is inevitable. It's very essential for a poem to use paradox. We have to use paradox sufficiently in poem. This is what Cleaneth Brook says. Paradox को हमें उपयोग करना है and इसी से poem को एक beauty आता है. According to Brook, paradox beautifies a poem, and he finds such a paradox in Wordsworth's Westminster Abbey and John Donne's canonization. So, Cleaneth Brook says that he finds such two paradoxes in Wordsworth's poem Westminster Abbey and John Donne's canonization. इन दो पोम में क्लीनेथ ब्रूक्स को दो पैराडॉक्स दिखाई देते हैं, and one is in Westminster Abbey. He is comparing the natural beauty with London. According to Brooks, both London and man are made by nature. So, as this London is made by man, in that sense, London is a creation of nature itself. So now he is comparing London with nature. This is the paradox in Westminster Abbey. And in canonization, the poet John Donne is comparing that divine love love with religion. Religion और love दोनों दो चीजें इन जो दो ऑपोजिट चीजों को कंबाइन करता है जॉन डन के कैनोनाइजेशन में. Love and religion is two entirely different things, and in canonization these two things are combined. This is the beauty of paradox. So यही तो है पैराडॉक्स की ब्यूटी, पैराडॉक्स का यूज. और ये जो पैराडॉक्स है इसके द्वारा हम we can make the poem more and more beautiful. Next is Heresy of Paraphrase. He is mentioning this heresy of paraphrase in the work in well-wrought un. Heresy means a mistake. Paraphrase is summarizing. Okay. So पैराफ्रेज के द्वारा जो गलत हम कर रहा है उसी के बारे में वो बता रहे हैं वेल रोट ऊन, ऐसा ही एक बुक में. ब्रूक टेल्स दैट paraphrasing a text is not correct. For Brook, it's not correct to summarize a work. When the poetry is paraphrased or summarized, we are doing an injustice to that poetry. तो जब एक पोएट्री को हम समराइज या पैराफ्रेज करते हैं तो उसमें हम एक मिस्टेक कर रहे हैं. द पोएटिक ब्यूटी इज लॉस्ट एंड द वैल्यू ऑफ द वर्क वोंट बी देयर. So Brooke feels that when we summarize or paraphrase a work or a poem, we are not doing justice to that work or that poem. It's because for Brooke, we can't we can't summarize the beauty of that work in 2 or 3 lines or a paragraph. Brooke calls this mistake as heresy of paraphrase. We can't interpret a poem by its 2 or 3 minutes summary. किसी वर्क को, किसी टेक्स्ट को 2 और 3 पैराग्राफ में या फिर 2 और 3 लाइन्स में समराइज करेंगे तो उसका ब्यूटी और वैल्यू उस पोएट्री से निकल जाएंगे. When we summarize that work within that 2 or 3 lines or paragraphs, we will lose its beauty, its poetic value, and its aesthetic sense. This is what Brooke is saying in well wrought wound. Next important feature of new criticism is described by William Hoods, Wimsatt and Monroe Beardsley. That is intentional fallacy and affective fallacy. So, what is intentional fallacy? When readers interpret the meaning of text by its author's biography, emotions, and intentions, this mistake is called intentional fallacy. That means when we are reading a book or a novel or a poem, whatever it is, and we are interpreting that book based on the emotions and intentions of and that background of that author, it is called intentional fallacy. So according when जब हम एक बुक पढ़ते हैं तो हमें सिर्फ और सिर्फ उसके अंदर क्या क्या लिखा है उसी के बारे में ही तो सोचना है. हमें तो उनके ऑथर के बायोग्राफी या उनके ऑथर के इमोशंस एंड इंटेंशंस इन सब के बारे में सोचने का ज़रूरत नहीं है. अगर हम ऐसे वो सब सोचकर उसी के बेसिस पे एक टेक्स्ट को इवैल्यूएट करता है तो वो एक गलती होगा और उसी गलती को ब्रेडस्ली कहते हैं intentional fallacy. When we think that this is what the author may have thought and meant, this is an error. By trying to know the intentions of the author, we are misjudging the text and it will lead to a subjective interpretation. So when we are evaluating a text based on the intentions of that author, actually it's not an objective interpretation, it will be a subjective interpretation. Next feature is affective fallacy. This feature is also described by Wimsatt and Beardsley, that affective fallacy is actually affective fallacy is completely against the reader response theory. Wimsatt and Beardsley says that we can't interpret a poem by its reader's response. हमें एक पोएम को रीडर के रेस्पॉन्स के द्वारा इंटरप्रेट हम कर नहीं सकते. यही कहता है Wimsatt in affective fallacy. That is, actually this is completely against the reader response theory, that according to reader response theory, we have to evaluate a poem on the basis of reader's response, reader's interpretation. बट ब्रेडस्ली हम ये कह रहे हैं कि रीडर के रेस्पॉन्स के द्वारा हम एक टेक्स्ट को इवैल्यूएट नहीं कर सकते. The text is independent from its author and reader and it's an autonomous entity. That means हम लिखने के बाद एक टेक्स्ट एक इंडिपेंडेंट एंटिटी है. It's free from author and reader. After writing the text, the text is independent in itself. It's an autonomous one. It has its own meaning and it's free from readers and ऑथर्स। लिखने के बाद हमें we have to think only on the text, not about author and reader. रीडर क्या सोचते होंगे और ऑथर क्या सोचते होंगे, इन सब के बारे में सोचने का जरूरत है ही नहीं है, बिकॉज टेक्स्ट टेक्स्ट इज एन इंडिपेंडेंट एंटिटी, इट हैज इट्स ओन मीनिंग, कहीं और मीनिंग को ढूंढने की जरूरत नहीं है. So a poem's quality is not based on a reader's mindset. The merit and meaning of the text is inherent in the text only. That means whenever a reader is reading the particular text, he may be in a different mood. If he is in a bad mood, he will feel that, definitely he will feel that that text is not a good one. So the mood, that emotional variations of the reader affects the text, the interpretation of the text. So that's why Beardsley says that a poem's quality is not based on reader's mindset. रीडर के मन के द्वारा हमें पोएम के क्वालिटी के बारे में सोचने का जरूरत है ही नहीं है. द मेरिट एंड मीनिंग ऑफ द टेक्स्ट इज इनहेरेंट इन द टेक्स्ट इटसेल्फ. जो मेरिट है, जो मीनिंग है, ये वो सब टेक्स्ट के अंदर ही है, वो बाहर कहीं बाहर कहीं भी नहीं है. विद इन जो सब कुछ है टेक्स्ट के अंदर ही है. सो वी हैव टू go inward, we have to go into the depth of the textbook, not outside of the world, like author's intention, reader's mindset, etc., etc. We have to concentrate only on the textbook. We have to concentrate only on the reading patterns, like meter, rhythm, जो जनर है और जो राइटिंग स्टाइल है, वो सब सिर्फ उसी के बारे में हमें सोचना है. सो दिस इज अ ब्रीफ डिस्क्रिप्शन ऑन न्यू क्रिटिसिज्म, that text is and the brief idea is that text itself is a complete entity. We don't need to go beyond the text, because text, everything is within the text. Thank you.